My guest today is Ryan Delk, the CEO and co-founder of Primer, a platform that helps top 1% teachers launch microschools in their communities. He's spent the last decade building tech companies like Square, Gumroad, and Omni, and was homeschooled K to eighth grade. Ryan lives in San Francisco with his wife and three kids. Ryan, welcome to the Liberated podcast.
Thanks for having me, Carrie. I'm excited to be here.
It's great to have you here. I'd love to start with your kind of unconventional education. You were homeschooled K to eight. How did that unique educational background really shape your vision for Primer, especially in its early days?
Yeah, my mom was sort of on the forefront of a lot of a lot of the things that now have catchy buzzwords associated with them.
Yeah.
It's funny because we'll talk about in my family we'll talk about how my mom just sort of intuitively did those things, and then now there's these, you'll read like a 7,000 word essay on Substack or something about coining some term for it. And it's like, oh, my mom did that 30 years ago before there was any name for that. So we had just, I mean, honestly, a incredible education. She started. We were zoned for a really bad public school. We were living in my grandparents' house. We didn't have a lot of money to be able to move to a different school district or attend a private school. And so she just took matters into her own hands and got a group of kids together from the neighborhood that were from other families that wanted a better school option. I think the two kind of hallmarks that I remember, the most salient things that I remember are on the academic side. It was she had a very rigorous posture towards academics, but it was rigorous in a sort of empowering way versus a authoritarian way. And so I don't remember what grade it was, maybe fourth grade. In August, she just sat down and she just wrote out all the concepts that I needed to master in math. And she put it on a single piece of paper. And she said, here's fourth grade math. And when you get done to this, you can start on fifth grade. You can go as fast or as slow as you want. Obviously, I'll help you, I'll teach you all these things. But this, like, I want you to understand in your head, this is the full scope of work ahead of you. And so it felt like, sort of we were in the driver's seat in a way that I think most kids don't experience, particularly at that age. Obviously, maybe later high school, college, you feel more in the driver's seat. And so there was this sort of this posture towards academics, which was taking it seriously and having a lot of rigor around core academics, but not but in a way that we still felt like we were sort of empowered in the experience versus having it happen to us. And then in the afternoons, she was extremely encouraging of us just going after things that we were excited about. So we were constantly starting businesses or working on crazy projects, or me and my siblings thinking about weird ideas of things we wanted to go experiment with. And she was really encouraging of that. Even the very dumb ideas that 12-year-olds come up with, in retrospect to me seemed dumb that I did, but she was like, yeah, go do it. Like you should definitely go tackle that. And so we had this sort of beautiful blend, I think, of rigorous academics with these deep experiences that we were able to go after. And in a lot of ways, those are the two hallmarks of Primer now, 28 years later, are these mornings that are filled with rigorous academics, but in a sort of in a structure where kids feel like they're in the driver's seat. They're taken seriously. They understand how they're pacing, where they're at, what they need to work on, in a very transparent way. And then in the afternoons, we call them Primer Pursuits, but kids can go deep on things they're excited about, whether that's building robots or art, or working on a microbiology research project or starting a company, whatever it might be. And so it's been very fulfilling for me, and very fun just on a personal level to see these things that I experienced sort of in a very manual way, sort of V0 when I was growing up, and now be able to bring them, hopefully to hundreds of thousands and then millions of kids across the US at Primer.
I love that. Yeah, scaling your K to eight experience, being homeschooled by your mom, to now bringing that to so many other families across the country. When we first met, Ryan, several years ago at an education gathering in New York City, Primer at that time, I think, was mostly focused on sort of clubs and community for homeschoolers. And then it evolved into this amazing microschool network. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about sort of the initial vision for Primer and how it's sort of evolved over time.
Yeah, I had this master plan, which, in retrospect, my sort of reflection on it now is that it looked really good on paper. But I didn't the specific thing that I didn't account for, didn't fully weight correctly in my plan was how different the types of team that you need to build is for building a sort of online only experience for ambitious kids to connect around things they're excited about versus building microschools and the actual sort of one-for-one replacement for traditional schools. And so I had the very brief version of this is I had this master plan of if we were going to build the best place for ambitious kids around the US to aggregate online. So if you were excited about actually many of the things that you do around pursuits now, were you could sort of meet other kids around the US that were excited about that. You could work on projects with them. And sort of it was sort of a replacement for how students might spend time on Roblox or Minecraft or these other services, but in a way that was much more accretive to their kind of learning and exploration of what they were excited about. And then when we got strong geographic density in certain areas, we would launch microschools for those kids, and we would be able to tell the parents, "Hey, your kid's been having this incredible experience on Primer. They've met all these other great kids. Here's all the cool things they're doing. We're now launching these microschools that are sort of the extension of that vision, but in the offline world." And the Node Coastal has this great quote that the team you build is the company you build. And I think that's the precise thing that I got wrong in this plan was the type of company and team you need to build in order to build the best in class online experience for really ambitious 12-year-olds who want to meet other really ambitious 12-year-olds and work on really hard projects with them is I don't want to say 100% different, but it's like there's only like 10% overlap, maybe, or 20% overlap with the type of company and team you need to build if you want to go launch, hundreds and thousands of micro schools across the US because they're just completely different motions. And so we sort of tried to do this gradual shift, and then I very quickly realized actually I need to restructure the team in very significant ways if we're going to go after the micro school vision, which was the thing that I was most excited about. And was always, in our sort of plan, it was always phase three. And so essentially what we did is we pulled, phase three up to, today, about 3 years ago, and said, we're going to go all in on this. And we sort of reoriented the entire team around that vision and sort of accelerating that to that point versus, 5 or 7 years from then. And then went all in and it's kind of been off to the races since then.
Yeah, for sure, off to the races. And I want to talk about where Primer is right now in terms of the micro schools that you've created and more coming soon. But let's start, if you could, by talking a little bit about sort of the early startup days as an ed tech founder. Did you know that you wanted to seek sort of venture capital funding out of the gate, or were you thinking that maybe this would start small and you'd sort of gradually grow? A lot of the founders I talk to who are just creating individual schools, never even consider venture capital or outside investment. I'm just curious about where you were in that process and when did you know that you wanted outside financing?
I think of it more in terms of outcomes versus I think sort of like deciding to take venture capital in some sort of like ideological sense, or like I want to take venture capital for the sake of taking venture capital is a really
Mm.
sort of bad way to make that decision. And so I always thought about it in terms of outcomes, and it was very clear that we have extremely lofty ambitions at Primer. We want we believe that there can be millions of kids that we can be educated through the Primer network over the next several decades. And to do that, it requires a very significant investment in the software side of what we're building in order to create the types of academic outcomes and standardized operations and understand the data that's happening across each individual school and figure out which schools are working well and aren't. And that's really the only way to deliver the quality of education at the price point we're trying to deliver it at, which is sort of the two variables that we optimize for that no one has really ever cracked at scale, is getting top quartile academic outcomes for under $7,000-ish a student, and that's what the team is maniacally focused on. And so when you have this sort of high upfront R&D costs on the engineering and product side, it's very, very difficult to finance that. Even if the individual schools maybe are self-sustaining from day one, and it's very difficult to finance that without raising some sort of equity capital. And so that's the reason why it was quite obvious to us that we needed to pursue that path because of the scale of the ambition in terms of how wide we want to be able to scale Primer over time.
Yeah, you really needed that accelerant to achieve those millions of students that you want to reach. So tell us what the Primer Network is like now. Where are you serving students? What kinds of students are you serving? How is the Primer Network operating?
So Primer is very simple. We help great teachers launch schools in their communities. That's what we are maniacally focused on. Um, we built a software platform that you can think of it sort of like an autopilot experience for running a school. So we try to abstract away all the paperwork, administrative work, busy work, even things like the politics of running a school, and allow teachers to focus on what they love doing, which is investing in kids, educating kids, building relationships, working on exciting projects with them. And so we want teachers spending as much of their time, on those things and as little of their time on the kind of administrative, bloat that happens in many education contexts. And so we have this experience, the software that sort of powers the teacher, student, and parent experience. And that's what a lot of teachers get really excited about with Primer. And then we also have this operations engine that handles almost all of the operations required to spin up a new school. And so I think we've launched, I think, more schools in Florida probably than anyone else over the last couple of years. And we have become, we're still learning and still improving, but we've become quite proficient at this motion of how do you go from, okay, we want to, this teacher wants to open a school in Fort Myers, Florida, to, okay, this school is actually live and, has all the regulatory approval and students can show up and the school can start operating. And it turns out that's actually very complicated and it's extremely nuanced. And so we use a combination of software that we built in-house, a bunch of data, some of it proprietary, some of it data that's public, to source, locations and real estate. And we're trying to become the best in the world at that motion of, hey, there's a great teacher that wants to launch a school. How do we get that school open as quickly as possible, as efficiently as possible, in a way that's asset light, doesn't require a lot of capex, construction, et cetera. And then once the school is live, Primer OS is sort of the software backbone for the school, but not in a way that we're quite opinionated that we don't want software to replace teachers. We want software to empower teachers. And so we do utilize all the best in class software, and we will use AI tutors when they're accretive to a student. But we really want that student teacher relationship. We believe that's very important and foundational for kids. And so the software is really in service of that versus aiming to replace that. So we have schools in Arizona and Florida today. We're launching a bunch of schools in Alabama in about 3 weeks. I don't know when this will air, but in early August. And so really excited about that. And then as far as the students, we can talk more about this if you'd like, but very quickly on the students that attend Primer, it's a bit counterintuitive. They actually aren't mostly are not private school students, are not homeschool students. These are kids that go to traditional schools. They're middle class, some upper class families, a lot of lower class families. They're just all united by a very simple thing, which is they want a school that works for their kids. That's all they're really asking for. They want kind of basic competency. They want their kids to be proficient at math, proficient at reading, proficient at writing. They want them to have an engaging education experience. And they're not getting that in the schools they're in today. And so our schools are not filled with a bunch of, rich kids that are coming from private schools, although there are many wealthy families that send their kids to Primer. And they're also not filled with people that sort of were seeking out some sort of alternative education. They were just looking for a school that worked for their family. And Primer is that school. And so about 85% of our kids come from public schools. So this is, we're sort of breaking a lot of the stereotypes that exist around private schools. And I'm extremely proud of that. I think a sort of core tenet of Primer is how do you build this great education product and experience that can scale and be accessible to every family in America. And so far, we're able to deliver on that, which I'm quite proud of.
Yeah, and in Arizona and Florida, of course, two states with generous school choice programs that enable education funding to follow families and families able to attend Primer tuition free to use some of their ESA, their education savings account dollars towards your program, which just makes a Primer education so much more accessible to more families. And how are you operating? And I imagine this depends on the state and as you expand into other states as well. Are the students considered private school students in, for example, the state of Florida and Arizona, or are they considered ESA homeschooled students? What is their identity?
We're standard private schools from regulatory perspective. So
Yeah.
there's nothing different between us and the Catholic school or other private school down the street.
And the teachers that are launching the microschools, I know you look for top performing teachers who want to start microschools. One sort of difference from primer microschools and other networks is that the teachers are not entrepreneurs themselves. Is that right? That they're working with Primer to run these programs, which takes some of the risk away from them, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I still think there's a lot of teachers as entrepreneurs is something that we are both very excited about. And I think a lot of our primary leaders identify with that idea. The difference is that I think we are able to essentially completely de-risk that decision for teachers. And
Yeah.
so almost all of the other, networks that are trying to do this, there's some risk involved for the teacher. It's either foregoing a salary, you got to secure your own real estate. And I think that just the reality is most teachers in America, because of the economic structure of the teaching profession, are not really in a position to take those risks. And so you end up in a situation where the average, great teacher that comes from the average kind of financial situation just has no hope of starting a school for their community, regardless of their, motivation and excitement about that. And so what we believe very strongly is that it is our job to become so good at the operations and so good at the software and the product to predict if a school is going to be successful and are there density of students around that location and is the real estate high quality, that we can take on all of that risk and we can say we will pay for the real estate, we'll get the real estate fully licensed and all the regulatory approvals required for that property to become live as a school. We will guarantee you a salary. We'll guarantee you a salary that's actually higher than your current salary. You will have other incentives financially that can ensure that you can make far more than you can make elsewhere. And we should be so good at those things that we can make those guarantees to teachers and deliver on that. And then it'll be obvious that Primer is the best place for ambitious teachers who want to launch schools to serve their communities. And so that's our posture is that's our job to solve that. And it is I would maybe say even inappropriate to put that on a teacher that has been working for 10 years, making 45 or 50 or $60,000 a year, and is really just in no financial position to be taking on a personally guaranteed loan or personal guaranteeing a commercial lease or these things that a lot of other folks ask them to do.
Yeah, such an interesting model. And I think it probably appeals to a lot of teachers who don't want to be small business owners, who want to do the work that they love, but not have that kind of entrepreneurial risk. So it's a great path for those who are looking for something different in education, without the risk. So what are the current numbers that you have with Primer in terms of numbers of schools and students served? And then we'll talk about your expansion into some other states.
Yeah, we'll have approximately 43 schools, I believe, that will be open in August when the school year starts. And then the average school has around 23 students. Some of those go higher, depending on if they have, a studio guide, just like a teacher's assistant with them. And then some of them are lower. We are in Alabama, Florida, and Arizona right now, or will be in August. And then we have several other states coming soon that we'll announce at some point that we're quite excited about.
And these are K to 8 micro schools. Is there a
Yeah.
reason that you're focused on kind of elementary, middle school and not high school? Is high school maybe down the road? What is the thought there?
Yeah, we'll definitely do high school. High school is a beast in and of itself. I'm actually maybe most excited about high school because I think the things that you can do in a primer like environment because of the way the day is structured, like if you imagine the pursuits that start, in third grade, a pursuit, might be like learning to build a very basic robot with your classmates and learning, the basics of how circuits work and how you program a robot. And maybe you're learning, the basics of code and how you can use code to control a physical object. But you could imagine that over time, by the time you get to ninth or 10th grade, that pursuit maybe looks, the pursuit's time maybe looks more like an apprenticeship or an internship. And you're getting exposure to things you may want to do professionally. Maybe you're getting actual technical training that is like directly, valuable for you professionally. I think of, the goal of education in our view is to deliver kids the best possible chance of reaching, whatever their sort of like max potential is. So every kid has, some sort of, potential based on their IQ and where they grew up and their family situation, all these things. And the goal of education is to not close off doors, for those kids, and to sort of, despite the forces of the world, sort of forcibly pry open the aperture and keep open the aperture of all the things that they can do in their life. And I would love for high school at Primer to be sort of like a direct accelerant of that. And so if you wanted to go, own an HVAC company, and you're a small town, like Primer should be the best place in the world for you to do that. Just like it should be the best place if you want to go to Harvard or something too. But giving kids these sort of the ways to make sort of tractable progress over the course of high school, is something we're really excited about. We are not there yet, and there's a lot of work to do on K through 8 to really nail it. But that is something I'm very excited about at some point.
So tell us about Alabama, because this is sort of an interesting partnership happening with Primer there. What is on deck?
Yeah, we're very, very excited about Alabama. One thing that I think is worth noting just at a meta level is a lot of the I think there's several cogent, accurate, intellectually honest, whatever phrase you want to use, critiques of education innovation, school choice, a lot of the movements that are happening right now. And the two that I think are sort of I actually agree with in most contexts is that a lot of the innovation that's happening in these states is happening primarily in urban areas. And so families that live in rural areas, the state will pass these programs, these school choice programs, and then the families in rural areas will say, okay, that's cool that happened at the state level, but look, no one's going to come build an innovative, no one's going to spend $5 million and build an innovative private school in my town of, 15,000 people. So this doesn't benefit us at all. Like I don't have any way to use this or to make my kids' lives better with this. And then similarly, the critique that okay, well, Florida has this $7,000 school choice, funding that you can access for a state scholarship for your kids to attend private school, but every private school costs $15,000 or $20,000. If I'm a single mom making $50,000 a year with three kids, that $7,000 scholarship doesn't suddenly make a $15,000, even a $12,000 school affordable to me. I still, have no choice but to send my kids to the current school they're at because I can't afford to go to these schools that even paying $5,000 or $6,000 out of pocket per kid. And so I think those are the two kind of strongest arguments against a lot of what's happening in school choice. And we believe that Primer is sort of the direct answer to both of those. And so we're launching schools in rural communities across both Florida and Alabama. We have a school in Florida that we're opening, I think, in a town of maybe 16 or 17,000 people. It's one of our fastest growing campuses. To my knowledge, I don't think any innovative charter or private school has opened there in 10 or 15 years. And then we have, almost all of our schools in Alabama will be either totally tuition free or under $50 a month for families to attend. So extremely low cost. And the $50 a month is actually a state sort of mandated rule for the partnership that we have there. And so we're quite maniacal about driving down the cost as low as possible, and then bringing this, and that's why we're so excited about the real estate model that we're starting to see some traction on. Is it allows us to open primers in places that no one would have thought that you'd have these innovative education options. And so we hear from these families that literally say to us, "I never thought we would get something like Primer here," and those are the moments that get me really excited because there are millions of Americans that are in sort of middle class or lower middle class homes that are amazing people. They're working extremely hard. They live in small towns across America, and they are just frankly being left behind. And if Primer can be a key part of delivering innovation to those communities, that's community driven, that's local in nature, that helps these local teachers that love these communities deliver a better education for those kids, that's what we're here for. And so we're slowly starting to see that happen, and hopefully we can do a lot more of it going forward.
Yeah, that must be so gratifying to you as a founder, hearing that feedback from families, just delighted to have more education options in their communities, especially if there haven't been many in the past. You mentioned, Ryan, that often a challenge for school founders relates to sort of regulatory issues, zoning challenges, occupancy codes that often are not updated perhaps to
Yep.
reflect smaller schools and spaces. And this is something that you're trying to tackle in pursuit of making it easier for these teacher entrepreneurs to get going and get started. Tell us about some of the regulatory reform efforts you've been involved with at Primer.
Yeah, everyone sort of assumes that the primary regulatory friction involved in opening new schools is related to the Department of Education at the state level. And that is about 5% of the friction happens through actual education regulation. The other 95% is just the incredible friction associated with doing anything in the real world in America. We've just there's just this sort of it's like this tsunami of regulations that sort of just come at you when you're trying to do something in the world of atoms instead of just bits. And we've tried to start to push back on that. It's quite incredible once you start to really dig into it. Like there are multiple, and this is obviously all very intentional. There are multiple very large municipalities in states across America that have a entire class of zoning within that municipality where schools can operate by right. So you could open a school, a K through 8 school, for example, and so they define this in the zoning code, and then they ensure that zero parcels are actually that zoning. And so they'll say, yeah, you can open. You'll literally be talking to them and say, absolutely, yeah, we have this SB1 zoning or whatever it's called, and that's where you can open schools by right. Unfortunately, of the 700,000 plots of land, there are actually none that are zoned SB1. So basically, good luck. You have to go through an exception process. Go before these various boards. And that's the only way to open a school, even a school of 30 or 40 kids. We had a school that we opened or tried to open and eventually did get it open where there was some anonymous sort of pushback that we sort of were able to trace back to some specific entities because we were opening a school. It was going to have 60 or 70 kids there, and there was a sort of long standing but sort of never enforced rule that you had to have parking for 3 school buses if you and do a traffic study for school buses to come in and out if you were going to open a school. Well, of course, we don't provide school buses. We're not a public school. The 3 school buses capacity would actually be more than the entire student population of the school, and it was totally ridiculous that we have to do this. And some of our I'll just say competitors decided to try to get that school shut down because we didn't have parking for 3 school buses. And so these are the kinds of things that you have to deal with. And I think that people totally underestimate. There's this I think a lot of state level policies and federal policies and different things that I think are very well intentioned to try to help both just education innovation more broadly, but then also bringing that innovation to middle and lower income sort of working class families. And if we do not solve the on the ground regulatory environment, all those things will be in vain because it actually doesn't matter that all those things are happening if you can't actually open innovative schools for kids. So we've changed state law in Florida twice to open about 50,000 new parcels of land where you can operate schools by right. That was an effort that we worked on last year. We're working on similar efforts in new states. We're working on some federal stuff as well. So I think there's now a sort of coalition of folks, bipartisan coalition that understand that this is really important to reform if we want these good education, low cost, high quality education options to come to new communities. But it's going to take a lot of work to get them across the finish line because these things did not happen by accident, I'll say. And so there's plenty of counter forces that want to ensure that it's still extremely restrictive.
Yeah, and these reforms that you've been spearheading and helping to, change state laws are helping not only primer microschools, but other new schools in these states. So it's really a win for everyone. Ryan, I'd love to hear what is next for Primer. How are you going to reach those millions of students, and when can we expect sort of massive change around education?
Yeah, we'll be announcing several new states soon. That we'll be excited. We're going to continue to expand, obviously, in Alabama and Arizona and Florida. I think a lot of the effort that we've put in over the last year has been on the software and what we call Primer OS side. And so that is the path. That is the long-term path to the unlocks that are required to do this at massive scale. And so that's those are kind of the big investments that we're making now that I think are starting to pay off and will start to pay off in big ways. So I'm quite excited by that. I would also say that I think there's a lot of momentum now for us around both local elected officials, state level elected officials who now come to us and say, hey, we really want this to come into our community. And so we get a lot of like mayors, state representatives, got people from governor's offices, governors themselves reaching out to us and saying, hey, we really want this here. How do we get primer to this city or the state or these communities? And so we'll lean in a lot more to that over the next couple of years because just having that partnership with local governments just it makes things so much easier and so much smoother. And we have sort of a growing kind of wait list of those folks. So we'll do kind of our current expansion motion, which we'll continue to do, but then we'll also do a lot of these partnerships with local and state governments where we're bringing primer to specific communities, kind of in partnership with the local government,
And
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 that'll
will those
accelerate
be
our growth.
public schools, Ryan? The
No,
partnerships with local, so they're still private schools, but
yep,
local governments kind of seeking out new
exactly.
models.
Exactly. So
Interesting.
same exact structure as our current schools, but in partnership with the local or state governments, because they recognize that we're able to deliver a quality of education at a price point
Hmm.
that no one can really match on both of those fronts. And so it's really valuable for their communities if they can get us there, especially in places where we talk to mayors all the time. They're like that. I've been trying to build a new school here, get a new school approved here for 6 years. It's still 5 years out. And we can, if we partner with them, we can spin up a school in 8 weeks or 12 weeks, very quickly. And so that's something that's very attractive to a lot of elected officials.
So, as we begin to wrap up, I'd love to hear some of your reflections as an entrepreneur. Most of my audience includes current or prospective school founders who are looking for inspiration and encouragement, many who are entrepreneurial parents and teachers looking to go off on their own. What have you found to be the most rewarding part of entrepreneurship?
Well, first, I'd say if for folks that are thinking about it, I highly encourage everyone to take the plunge. I think that it's even in small ways, it is so deeply fulfilling, and I think that even from the smallest, just kind of side project ideas, all the way up to the ideas that you might spend 40 years on and go change the world. I think we need far more people willing to take risks to go build something. And so I would just encourage, it's a very strongly held belief that I have. And so I would just encourage you to lean into that gut feeling if you have it. For me, I actually, the thing that gets me kind of most energized is really taking these problems that haven't been solved before, that either seem impossible or even in some cases, it's like even just understanding the problem seems impossible because there's so many layers of opacity and conflicting information, and figuring out how to make sense of that, and then find some path forward. And so this is a lot of the regulatory work that we've done, a lot of the local land use stuff that we've done, a lot of the software that we built on real estate, all fits into that category. And that's the stuff that gets me, just really, really excited is, the weeks or months that you think, is this actually like, is this actually solvable? Is there actually a path forward here? And then you finally find, we spent, many weeks trying to figure out if there was some way to predict if a given building would have fire sprinklers in it because it's required per the 2013, I think, fire code update. All educational occupancies now have to have fire sprinklers. And we finally found this breakthrough that we were, that allowed us based on, a very specific type of publicly available data point, without knowing anything about the building, you could find this data point, and then you could correlate that with a very high degree of accuracy on whether or not that building had fire sprinklers. And that's an example of something that when we figured that out, it was like this, it's sort of euphoric moment for the team when we realized it was actually accurate, and you could do it at scale. And those kind of things just are really rewarding and exciting to me.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, and I share your heartfelt belief that folks should lean into that entrepreneurial spirit and just take the plunge to build things. What would you say in terms of advice for a new education entrepreneur? What should they be thinking about as they hang up their shingle for the first time?
Hmm. I think the maybe the I'm not probably the best person, to think about sort of generalized advice for education entrepreneurs because we're doing something very, very different than a lot of
But
other
your
folks.
experience as an education entrepreneur, like sort of thinking back to your early
Yeah.
days as a founder, what lessons learned would you like to share for an upstart entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think maybe the biggest thing, and this is also more generalizable, is just there were so many people that told us that primer would never work.
Mm.
Most of the kind of education establishment when we were, getting started in terms of, people that were kind of the big names in education, basically said like this has no shot, like this will never work. And I still hear that often. And I think that you need to have this both for yourself and for your team. You have to have this sort of psychological fortitude where education is so people get so emotional and it gets so intense and political, and you just need to have this psychological fortitude to just have if you have conviction in what you're doing, you need to be willing to just hear that, and it's gotta roll right off, or you're gonna maybe literally go insane. And so when we hire people, I literally tell them like, hey, this is going to feel like war sometimes. Like they're going to be, there's going to be people coming at you saying terrible things about you, terrible things about us. I just need to look you in the eyes and tell you that's going to happen. And if you're good with that and you're excited about that and you're going to use that as fuel, then great, welcome to the team. But if that's going to get to you, like you need to know now that this might not be the best place for you. And I think, obviously, when you're at a smaller scale, less notoriety, less people coming at you. But I think you have to have a little bit of that fortitude to make something happen in the space.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, sort of move past the naysayers
Yeah.
and have that sort of stick-to-itiveness even when things get difficult and when there are critics around you. So great advice for founders in all sectors, but especially in education. So Primer's website is primer.com. Is that the best place for folks to follow along on Primer's expansion and find out what's next and connect with you?
Yeah. So if you're a teacher that is interested in launching a primer, I would love to connect you with our team. You could just email me directly, r@primer.com. I would love to talk to you. Would love to connect you with our team. And yeah, if you're interested in following along, primer.com @primer on Twitter. And would just be happy to connect with anyone who's interested in launching schools.
Well, I'm just thrilled to see Primer's success and continued expansion. I look forward to millions of students being served by your incredible program. Ryan Delk, thank you so much for being on the Liberated podcast.
Thanks for having me, Carrie.